Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, the early season college football lines just came out, which means college football season is right around the corner. And it also means we have a really easy topic for today's show. So I am fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing good, and it's a nice departure from the last show we did, which is a serious subject, to now we can move on to something that has never harmed anybody: gambling. So,
Win-win gambling, famously win-win gambling. Yes.
yes.
Yeah. Tony thinks that because this is a story we've never before told on the podcast. The statute of limitations has now expired. So now we can tell it. When we go to Nebraska, we stay in Council Bluffs, Iowa. It's about an hour away from Lincoln, because when you have a Lincoln and Nebraska home game, all the hotels in Lincoln and within an hour of Lincoln are all basically booked up. So you end up staying across the border in Iowa. Council Bluffs also has casinos and a sports book. So that's where a number of people on the Ohio State beat will stay when we make our Nebraska trips. When we were there 2 years ago, it was a Friday night, and there was a Cal Arizona State game. There was a Penn State Maryland game. One of the other members of the then Ohio State beat, who fancies himself quite a gambler, was I believe in pretty heavily on Maryland, and they were down about 59-0 at halftime. So I don't believe that one cashed. Tony and I are not exactly veteran gamblers, but it's like, we'll go through $20 on something. And I believe I cashed a parlay on that Arizona State Cal game. It was like ASU and the points, maybe in the under. And Tony, I put in just a ridiculous, stupid 16 parlay and missed it by one. Tony, you have a 6 or 7 team, something like that?
It was a 16. It's the first time I've ever put any money down on anything. And I think it was maybe a $25 total bet, a 16 parlay with, the under of that one. That we were sweating that one out at the sports book. And then what almost did me in was the easiest of the 6 bets was the Clemson money line over North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the day North Carolina was going for 2 to beat Clemson, and they failed. And that I was in the Nebraska press box in the media center, like the media workroom, like celebrating while everybody else, like, what are you talking about? Clemson won. Why are you excited about that? And so, it was a good day. It was like I said, like a $25 bet. Never done it before. Didn't know how to do it. I was there with some vets, and it was a good day.
The best part of that story was the people who do bet quite a bit getting extremely angry at you. Like, no, that's not supposed to, that's not how this works. You don't win. That's stupid. A 16 parlay is stupid. You don't do that. You shouldn't win. No. And it was like, no one was, people weren't happy. They were extremely angry at you for winning this bet. And it was fantastic.
Like the coaches say about the young players, like they don't know what they don't know. That was me. Like, why wouldn't? What's so hard about it? If you know one's going to happen, the others, why not put them together and just keep building on everything that's going to happen? But
that was the weekend. I think Ohio State was minus 14 or 17 against Nebraska. And it was like, okay, I want to be responsible. I'm only going to put $20 on this. But really, I could pretty much put my house on this and know that Ohio State is going to cover this in the first quarter. And then unless they get backdoored, you're probably fine. So, I believe we probably each cashed that one as well. But yeah, good news, Tony. At Nebraska on the schedule this year.
Unfortunately, that is not one of the early lines that was released by the FanDuel Sportsbook yesterday. But there still are a number of Ohio State lines that we could talk about. And Tom and I each put together a bunch that we're interested in, and we'll get to those here in a sec. But first, let's talk about some of the Ohio State lines. And the first one being Ohio State as a 10-point favorite over Michigan, to which my question is, I can't believe FanDuel thinks Michigan is going to score 90 points against the Ohio State Buckeyes.
My question is, what's the line for the last 3 quarters?
Yes.
Walk me through the scenario where Michigan is within 10 points of Ohio State this year.
Like in the fourth quarter?
I mean, for this bet not to cash, walk me through the scenario where Michigan is within 10 points of Ohio State at the end of this game.
Um, I that it's really
travel.
hard. Like
It involves a travel mishap of some sort of cataclysmic injury, meteor strike on the Woody Hayes Athletic Center
COVID
before the week of
two.
the game, electric boogaloo. Yes, it's possible. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying, like, I looked at that and I was like, huh, what's the second half line?
I
I okay. I mean, cool.
like well,
I'm gonna spoil something.
hmm,
This is part of the parlay I put together.
say
I wish I could put it in there 3 times.
well, I guess you probably could. There's we don't know the unders or overs or anything like that,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, the because at that point Michigan will be playing what their third or fourth quarterback who may actually be their first quarterback again. So maybe there'll be some familiarity there, but that one I posted out on the Ask the Insiders message board, and everybody's like, I want in on that. I don't know if these are limited bets right now. Usually the early stuff it's
Mm-hmm.
pretty limited, but that would seem to be one that a bunch of people should get in on. Now, some of the other Ohio State lines they released the Oregon, Indiana, and Penn State. I'm not as confident in the Oregon and Indiana lines. Ohio State is a 9-point favorite over Oregon, 11-point favorite at Indiana, 11.5-point favorites at home against Penn State. Which of those three do you feel the best about?
I would say probably the most optimistic about Penn State, maybe. I mean, at
Mhm.
Indiana is like, yeah, you could have something crazy happen there. Oregon is one of the like highest teams in the nation for returning production from last year. Ohio State's okay, but they're not, super high on that list. Early in the year, first home game, you could see a first time starter Ryan not wanting to really push things.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I didn't have the Oregon or Indiana games in my list of 10 that I might choose to parlay. I did. I'll go ahead and say I threw the Penn State in there. I don't know if it's going to be like one of my final six or something like that. So let's move to the Michigan Wolverines because also there are also some Michigan plays some big games.
Mm-hmm.
Now they don't just play Ohio State every year. We know they don't play Ohio State every year, but they also play some other games. I was, I guess, a little surprised to see that they opened as a 2.5-point underdog at home to the Washington Huskies in week 2. That is a level of, I don't know if it's disrespect or extremely adequate and proper respect to have Michigan a home underdog to some soft Pac-12 team.
Yeah, and I mean Washington is like in the plus on returning talent, but Michigan is the biggest returning talent level of anyone in the Big Ten, which tells you probably a little bit about what Vegas thinks of the talent that is returning to Michigan. I mean, if you didn't have cornerbacks last year and they're all back, is that a good thing or a bad thing? If you didn't have defensive tackles last year and they're all back, like, well, and there's been enough upheaval and enough turmoil in that coaching staff that I I am pretty out on Michigan for this year. I think there's a lot of losable games on that schedule, and I mean, we'll go through a bunch of them, I'm sure, but yeah, that Washington game, like Jimmy Lake's second year, I believe. I mean, they were that Washington was a pretty good team last year. They've got a pretty decent level of talent. It that feels like it should be a close game, but I'm with you. I was a little surprised to see Michigan an underdog because I mean that tells you if you're getting 3 points at home and you're given 2.5, that means you're 5.5-point underdog in a neutral field. Like that's a lot for what seems like it should be a fairly even game.
Especially when you consider that Michigan is usually not tripping over their own feet within the first 2 games of the season. It's usually game 3 to game 12 where things get, a little rough. Game 1, game 2, that's where the hype gets built. That's where things look good. That's where Joe Milton is Cam Newton.
Mm.
And then
yeah. I would think you'd have a decent argument to put a little bit, if you were going to put money on one side of this or the other. I think you've got an argument to put some money on Michigan. Again, I don't think they're going to be great, but Washington in the trenches is not Oregon in the trenches. So I don't know if they can just like manhandle Michigan the way like an Oregon team or an Ohio State team could. So Yeah, I would be if I was. I don't have a real strong opinion here, but if I was going to do something, I would probably take Michigan there and take the 2.5.
Right. And then if Michigan loses a season opener to Western Michigan, see if you can get that money back. Like, just see if they'll just like keep the receipt and then try to get your money back on that one.
Yeah, if Michigan loses the opener to Western Michigan, see if you can middle that bet with Michigan plus 2.5 and then Michigan plus 12.5 after the line moves. But yeah, I don't think they'll lose to Michigan to Western Michigan. But yeah, that Washington game is going to be like if they lose that game and they lose a game by 10 points, like that's one of those like, oh, okay, so Jim Harbaugh's just done now. Okay, okay, good.
Well, and then the Wolverines are 9.5-point road underdog at Wisconsin, which is a little surprising to me because I don't think Wisconsin's running game is all that just yet. We don't know exactly who it's going to be. Everybody likes Graham Mertz, and the offensive line is what it is. They've got some receivers. 9.5 is a lot, but if they only have to score 21 to get there, like,
well, and you know, this is the same Wisconsin team that has just annihilated Michigan recently because Michigan, what is one of their big just deficiencies on defense is that middle of the defensive line. If you don't have defensive tackles, Wisconsin is going to be a bad day for you. That is not a good matchup. And was it 2 years ago that it was, you know, Michigan came in thinking, yeah, we're back. And then it was 35-0 Wisconsin at halftime. Like you know, it's probably not 35-0 this year, but you know, having that game be 24-10 Wisconsin at halftime, like I could absolutely see that. And then if you're up by 14 points, Michigan gets one dimensional and Wisconsin gets to do the one dimension that they want to do anyway. So I would take Wisconsin. I would be happy to give those points.
Then you have the Michigan Wolverines are 9.5-point home favorite against Northwestern. On today's Morning Scoop, you previewed Northwestern, who I was shocked, stunned, and horrified to. I shouldn't say horrified. That's mean. I was surprised to find out that Hunter Johnson is still there in Northwestern at quarterback as a candidate to start. I don't think he's going to win the job, but just a surprise that he's still fighting it out as a grad transfer in his third year there. But 9.5 points at home against Northwestern. Northwestern, I don't like involving them in any kind of wagering. I don't. Again, I've only ever done it once, and so I don't. I wouldn't want to bet against Northwestern or for Northwestern just because, as you said on the show, they're up and down, and they are, and now they're due to be down. But Michigan is also down, and it's just run. It's like an ACC. Like, here, you want to bet Boston College and Virginia Tech? No, you don't.
Well, Northwestern is one of those teams where, yes, they're going to be bad, but they're also, even when they're bad, they're not the kind of bad that you beat 50-10, unless you're 2019 Ohio State. They're the kind of bad that you beat 21-13 or, 17-10. Northwestern just doesn't give up a million points unless they're like completely outclassed in terms of talent on the other side of the field. They're a little bit like Iowa, where you get real skittish looking at trying to pick an Iowa game against the spread, because it's like, well, even if they're completely outclassed, they're going to just slow down the pace. They generally play pretty good defenses. They're decent enough in the trenches on both sides of the ball that they can kind of keep from getting completely run over. And that's not a recipe for a game where you're going to feel real confident in, giving a whole bunch of points.
The revenge tour for Michigan will continue on the road at Michigan State this year, where the Wolverines are a 6.5-point favorite over the Spartans. Now, I don't know if Michigan State will have 11 players per side this year. I'm not exactly sure if that's going to work out. I do know they'll have to have at least enough guys on the line so they don't have like an illegal formation. I don't know if they're going to have enough players to actually, man all of the positions, because they lose players every day. 6.5 points. I don't know how last year happened. And so the fact that could happen last year means it could happen this year. Although thinking Michigan State could do this 2 years in a row is, again, this is one I'm staying away from.
See, this is one that I have on my list. I'd like Michigan State's chances here. I mean,
Wow.
6.5 is, again, Michigan State is not a team like. Run me through the scenario where Michigan just completely obliterates Michigan State, like just dominates the game on both sides of the ball. I mean, Michigan State. This is one that is never a game that Michigan State's going to overlook, ever, never, ever, ever. So they're going to throw everything they've got at it because this is a game where if you go 4-8 but you beat Michigan, like everyone's like, all right, that's fine. You get another season. That's everything. That's cool. You've seen this over and over and over again until the very, very, very end of the Mark D'Antonio area. That was always just Michigan State just gave Michigan fits every year. I am just not a believer in Michigan this year. And there are enough games where they're going to have to, this is not like, well, this is, they only have to, this is not Ohio State where it's like, well, they just have to focus all their energy on these 4 games and all the other games they can just kind of roll the ball out there and they'll win. They've got they've got 6, 7 losable games on the schedule. They're going to be putting a lot of stuff on film earlier in the year because they've got to, they have to beat Washington. They have to beat Wisconsin. They have to beat these teams before they get to the Michigan State game. You have enough turmoil on the coaching staff. Those who stay will be champions is fine, but like there are guys who aren't staying. Like there's been a lot of turnover on that roster and all that. I mean, it just doesn't feel to me like a season where it's going to, they're all going to band together and, it's going to be the best high school yearbook ever. Like it doesn't feel like that's the kind of year that they're going to have. It just feels like you're going to come in, there's going to be this vague sense of optimism. They're going to lose a couple early games and then it kind of goes off the cliff. That's kind of what I see for them this year. This would be part of that. And, if you lose to Mel Tucker, Michigan State for the second year in a row, like you are officially fired at that point. Like even if they haven't announced it, like there's no coming back from that unless you somehow beat Ohio State at the end of the year. But you might actually be, you might be told you were fired before the game, even if you haven't officially been fired out loud yet.
Is that one of those where you just like go back to the office and start cleaning up before you even check your phone? Just
the Lane Kiffin tarmac firing. Like, no, I think we're done here.
But I think what you're missing here, Tom, is Rocky Lombardi's not walking through that door. He may actually just be visiting at some point or cleaning the halls. I don't know.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Yes. See, I don't know that either. We should not be so mean about the players. They're trying. I say that to you mostly. Here's one that I have in my 10. Michigan is a 7-point underdog at Penn State. I'm taking Penn State all day in that one. That will probably be a whiteout. In which case,
what other game would be the whiteout for them this year? It's either Ohio State or Michigan.
Yeah.
Those are the two. So
yeah, I think this is going to be. I don't see. I'm going to use your verbiage here. Like, give me the scenario where Michigan stays within 7 points of Sean freaking Clifford.
The scenario is Penn State's up by 21 and James Franklin horribly mismanages the game towards the end. And that's the scenario where, they're up by a bunch and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, hey, how is this a 4-point game? But I would think having money on James Franklin is probably one of those like really uncomfortable things where it's like, oh man, like just, I don't know, betting on a kid who's just learning how to walk. And it's like, well, I've seen this kid fall down so many times. Like maybe this is going to be the time that it happens, but man, if he falls again, I'd feel real bad. Like I've seen James Franklin fall down a whole lot. So he's a little bit of a stay away from me, but yes, purely objectively, yes, that is a game that Penn State should win. Penn State should win comfortably. And again, if you're in this point of the season, because that's relatively late in the schedule, right? The Penn State Michigan game, I believe.
Yeah,
I think it's relatively late in the season. You may be in the kind of like, all right, we're done here. Like pack up the tense portion of the schedule, especially if they've just lost to Michigan State. Like that might, if that's the 4th loss, like, and you're down 10, 17 points at halftime, like that might just be all.
I hear what you're saying, but I'm taking James Coyne to the moon.
Diamond hands on this 4th and 5.
Yeah, I Michigan on the road is not good. I will say I see Michigan State winning on the road at Michigan State 20-13 to cover. So that's going to be a tough one.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be ugly, horrific. You can't turn away. You have to watch it. Any other, there's Wisconsin's a 3.5 point home favorite against Notre Dame in week 4, which, I mean, I don't know who the quarterback is at Notre Dame this year. I don't know if Notre Dame knows yet.
Yeah.
Not that everything relies on quarterbacks, but that's like the first place you look. So that's interesting to me. The other one with Notre Dame's, they're just a 3-point favorite at home to Cincinnati the week after that Wisconsin game. I wonder if there's if it would be a larger line if it wasn't the week after playing Wisconsin.
That one is one that I had down on my list, and I have Notre Dame -3, and my rationale there is just the world is not a beautiful enough place for Cincinnati to go into South Bend and beat Notre Dame. So that's the extent of my thinking there. But Cincinnati's got basically some of the most talent back in the entire country on that returning talent index. They were fantastic last year. You could make an argument they had a similar level of talent to Notre Dame last year. On the road. Maybe Notre Dame is beat up the week after Wisconsin. It could happen. And that's, that is obviously going to be Cincinnati's Super Bowl. Because, if Cincinnati wins that, I think they have one other Power 5 team on their schedule, and I'm not remembering who it is right now. But, if Cincinnati can run the table, they win at Notre Dame, you get in that playoff conversation. I will believe that they make the playoff when I see the committee actually giving some indication that they're a non-Power 5 school has a chance to make the playoff. But that is very clearly their Super Bowl. The other side of that, though, is Marcus Freeman just went from defensive coordinator at Cincinnati to defensive coordinator at Notre Dame. So you would think Marcus Freeman would have a pretty good sense for how to kind of slow down that Cincinnati offense. And he has better players now to slow down the Cincinnati offense than he did when he was at Cincinnati trying to do it in practice. So that may be, a little bit of a deciding factor there. But yeah, I mean, overall, just I don't think that the world would permit enough joy for Cincinnati to go into South Bend and beat Notre Dame.
Although it would be a nice kind of reward for going through 2020 to have something good happen in 2021 like that. Been seeing Cincinnati quarterback Desmond Ridder littered all over the first round of mock drafts, which kind of surprises me that a guy who he's come a long way and has been productive from the start, but has gotten better over the years, and I think he can put up some points. That'll be a fun one to watch. And if Cincinnati wins that erases Notre Dame's argument for the playoffs.
Oh, yeah, completely. Yeah, I mean, that takes Notre Dame completely out of the playoff conversation at that point. Like, if you lose to a non-power team, like at home, like bye. Bye.
Especially if that team is then in the conversation, like they have just taken your spot.
Mm-hmm.
They are drinking Notre Dame's milkshake.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's Alabama. Some of these lines for Alabama have been just outrageous. Like, it just shows you how bad the SEC is. They can't compete with a team like Alabama that doesn't even win a national championship every year. Alabama is a 15-point favorite at Florida in week 2. I saw somebody talking about how Emory Jones, quarterback at Florida now, is a lot like Cam Newton. He's going to be slinging it all over the place. And I was like, Emory Jones that comes in and runs the ball. If you say so, I haven't seen. I don't know if I've ever seen him throw the ball since like high school. But to think he's just going to come in and start slinging it like Kyle Trask, that's a bit much for me. And 15-point favorite at Florida. I feel like I should have put this on my list of 10 now that I look at it. It's a big number, but I don't know if it's out of place.
Yeah, and I think Florida's going to be good, but and Alabama's losing a lot, but Alabama also has a lot. So, they're like a little bit like Ohio State, where you look at the returning production and it's like, oh man, they've lost so much. They have to plug in all these different 5 stars now. This is going to be such a challenge for. Alabama does feel like they're a little overvalued, and they price in the public team thing where they probably add a point or two to Alabama because they know everyone's going to go, well, I don't want to bet against Alabama. But here's the thing: you will never feel dumber than you do betting against Alabama. One of the things I had on my first list was Miami plus 17.5 against Alabama in the first week. Miami's number 3 in the nation in returning talent. It's like, yes, but if I did have money on that game, would I want to be sitting there in the third quarter with Alabama up by 13 and driving and going, well, maybe Miami can hold on here. Like, no, that's not what you want to be doing. You don't want to bet against Nick Saban. So, yeah, I mean, I think the lines are all kind of high for them, but also I wouldn't really bet against them.
Yeah, and the last time Florida beat Alabama at home was Tim Tebow was the quarterback, was a backup freshman quarterback in 2006. They beat him again in 2008 in the SEC championship game. But it's been a pretty cold stretch for the Gators there. Tom, let's go ahead and get into what we're looking at, our 10, because there's another Alabama game in there that I have, which is Texas A&M plus 13 at home against Alabama. I don't know exactly what all at Texas A&M. They lose Kellen Mond. They still have Isaiah Spiller, tremendous running back. Jimbo Fisher's been able to bring in some talent there, and so I assume if it's ever going to happen, and I'm not saying Texas A&M is going to beat Alabama, but and this wouldn't be like I wouldn't do this in a like a parlay. But it's interesting to me, and I think if it's going to happen, maybe this is the year. Plus 13. That's a lot. And I wouldn't be shocked if Texas A&M stays in there.
That was one that I looked at, and if it was 14, I probably would have taken Texas A&M. 13 is like, boy, you can just paint a scenario where that's like 45, 31, yeah. And I'm with you there. I think Texas A&M should be pretty good this year. But again, do you want to bet against Alabama? That just feels like you're sitting there watching the game in the second half and going like, well, why did I do that? How did I talk myself into this again? This was stupid. Alabama is, again, this may be a rebuilding year for Alabama. This may be a non-New Year's Six or at least non-playoff year for Alabama. But you could go broke betting against, well, this is the year Alabama's going to take a step back. It's like, yeah, they had that one Citrus Bowl year, but in all these other years, they haven't had that. So, yeah, I'm just so reticent to bet against Alabama at this point. Like,
and really, I don't see it as a bet against Alabama. I see it as a bet for Jimbo. It's just unfortunate that the game matches them both up.
Just wait till Nick Saban tells his players. When he tells his players, it won't be. It's going to be disrespect. This man who just watched us win the national championship game 52-24 thinks you're not good enough to beat this little old crappy Texas A&M team that has to make up national championships from 80 years ago.
He's right.
I mean, but congratulations. Now Texas A&M just lost by 45 points. Great job, Tony. Good job.
Give me one of yours.
I've got. Well, the first thing on here is I have Miami plus 17.5 versus Alabama. And then right after that, I wrote, but this is dumb. So I kind of scratched that out. So next one is Clemson -3 versus Georgia. That's just a real interesting game. And it just to me has the feel of whoever loses that game will end up winning their conference and making the playoff. And there will be a rematch in the playoff. And then the team who lost the first game will absolutely win the second game, like absolutely win the second game. So I'm saying Clemson -3. I think they have enough returning talent. They've got you have a new starting quarterback, but he's not really a new starting quarterback. You've seen enough for him. He went on the road at Notre Dame and just completely lit Notre Dame on fire last year. Like I don't think they're going to have a big step back there. And Georgia, they have started a little slow at times in the past. It wouldn't shock me if that happened again. And 3 points is not much. That's close enough to a pick 'em that I'm comfortable taking Clemson, and we'll see how it goes. But I just everyone's treating JT Daniels like JT Daniels is future Heisman winner JT Daniels, and it's like, yeah, maybe. I mean, possibly, but the sample size at the end of last year was not huge, and I know Georgia didn't care about the game against Cincinnati, and that's the only reason it was close, but. There are enough questions there that I think you could take Clemson and give 3 points.
I have this on my list as well, and I have Georgia +3. I like the Bulldogs. I like the running game, and JT Daniels is fine. But the defense and everything else. After seeing Clemson firsthand last year, I have questions about the defense. Although they'll be better this year because they were very young up front last year, and Brian Bresci and all those guys are a year older. so that will help. But I'm looking forward to this one. We'll be off the road, be able to watch it. A friendly wager of $1,000 between you and I, let's say. I like Georgia in that I like them so much. Like I said, I put them as part of my 16 parlay that I'm putting together here. I'll go one for you, Tom. Oklahoma minus 18 hosting Nebraska.
Wow, Tony, that's really spicy. Let me tell you my next one. Oklahoma minus 18 versus Nebraska.
It just feels free to me, especially after Nebraska trying to get out of it. Oklahoma being like grabbing them by the collar. No, you get back here. It's very, very similar to the free money a couple years ago when we were there in Council Bluffs.
Yeah, you look at the talent on those two teams, and it's like it's not the same. This is Oklahoma is not Ohio State, but they're Ohio State minus. They're like 90-something% of Ohio State, 85% of Ohio State talent wise. Nebraska is like 45% of Ohio State talent wise, 50% of Ohio State talent wise. Like it's just you got Spencer Rattler. Probably go ahead and book your plane ticket to New York. I don't know if you're going to win the Heisman, but you're going to be there. You've got an Oklahoma defense that is better. This is not, this is still not the 85 Bears, but this is, Alex Grinch. I have given Alex Grinch crap for years and years and years for having this reputation as a defensive genius and never actually having the results of a defensive genius. He has improved that team. That team went from atrocious to not terrible to like decent last year. They weren't incredible, but they were decent. They were like maybe a top 25, top 30 defense in a lot of those advanced statistical metrics. If they're there again this year and they can score the way that a Lincoln Riley offense typically can score, like I see no reason this game is not 52-17. Like, can we get a better line on Oklahoma minus 30? Because I probably bet that too.
When a team is trying to get out of the game, there's good reason for it, and I think we'll all see why. Now, Tom, do you have something to say about that?
I was wondering if we were going to circle back to our Ohio State minus 10 conversation from earlier, or is that a different?
I think we're both putting that in. Yeah, yes, that is definitely part of my 16 parlay. That one, that's the quick first money, and then okay, what else? What other box am I going to check? What other games? I have two other Big Ten games in my list here. Ohio State minus 11.5 against Penn State.
I also have Ohio State minus 11.5 against Penn State.
Yeah, and then Penn State minus 7 versus Michigan. I have both of those two. I think Ohio State, when Penn State comes to town, that could be 17 points. It could be 34 points. I just don't think it's going to be under 2 touchdowns. Not the way Penn State moves the ball, not the way they defend it, not the way James Franklin performs in big games. So I think I feel pretty comfortable about that one.
Yeah, I don't really see Penn State as a threat to score 24, 30 points against Ohio State this year. So then, if Penn State's not scoring 24 points, then Ohio State just has to score 35 to cover. And okay, like you want to bet against Ohio State scoring 35 points this year against Penn State? Like I will, you can find me on Twitter at Tom Orr 4 if you would like that action. But no, I'm right with you right there. I think, that's just the Michigan one. Like I didn't pick Penn State just because I get a little weird about picking James Franklin versus Jim Harbaugh is not a meeting of the minds I want to have any money on. But that's a totally defensible pick. I know exactly why you're doing it. That's just, if I didn't have the history with James Franklin that I do, I would feel like, oh yeah, that's a very logical pick. But no, I'll pass on betting on James Franklin for now. Thank you.
How do you feel about Iowa minus 3 at home against Penn State?
Iowa is a perpetual stay away from me. I have another one on this list, which is Iowa State minus 4 versus Iowa. And I just, after that, have also written, this is dumb. Like you do not bet on that game. That game is Iowa State is objectively a far more talented team this year. They should be favored by 10 against Iowa this year. And yet, like, what is your level of confidence in the Iowa State matchup in any given year that there will be any kind of a rational result or any kind of a result where one team blows the other one out? It just that game is 15-10 every year in my mind. Like it's always close.
Matt Campbell, I just stay away from him because, yeah, like I'm not going to get involved with Iowa State, Oklahoma, Iowa State, Texas. They could blow either of those teams out, and then somehow they could lose to Texas for no reason. So I stay away. Do you have a 16 parlay that you are comfortable producing for me, Tom?
Yeah, I'll go with the Clemson -3 against Georgia, Oklahoma -18 against Nebraska, Notre Dame -3 against Cincinnati, Ohio State -11.5 against Penn State. The one in here that I have that's a little bit, it's going to go against a lot of stuff that I've said. LSU +24 at Alabama.
Wow.
That is a ton of points, and I think LSU is a team that's going to be. They're not going to beat Alabama this year, but I think coming off of last year, that was not a representative season for LSU. I think you're going to have, I think everyone's looking at LSU from last year and going, oh, they were so bad. They were, and the defense was so abysmal. There's no possible way. It's like, yeah, but they're still incredibly talented, and they are number one in the nation in returning talent. So you have a defensive coordinator who actually can call a modern defense now, which is, that is an important thing. Write that down, coaches. That is an important note. Have a defensive coordinator who is not Bo Pelini. And you've got a ton of returning talent. That is annually one of the most talented teams in the country. They don't need to beat Alabama. They just need to stay within 24 points of Alabama. Is it possible they lose that game 48-20? Like, sure, it's possible, but I think they're talented enough to hang in there and at least cover that spread. I think I probably am going to end up at 7 because I do have Michigan State +6.5 against Michigan and Ohio State -10 against Michigan.
All right, that's good. I could probably do 7 as well, starting with Ohio State -10 at Michigan. Then I'm going to go Georgia +3 at Clemson. I feel good about it, Tom.
Week one of us is already going to have lost this parlay.
Mm-hmm. Ole Miss -7 Louisville that week 1 as well. I think I feel pretty good about that. I didn't. Mm-hmm. We didn't really talk about that one, but I like Lane Kiffin early on. Then of course the freebie, the free space, Oklahoma -18 against Nebraska. Ohio State -11 versus Penn State. Penn State -7 versus Michigan, and one we haven't talked about, Arizona State -23.5 versus Arizona.
I looked at that. I thought seriously about that. If you don't remember what happened in that game last year, that was the game that got Kevin Sumlin fired. It was 70-7 Arizona State, and it was one of those games that was not as close as the score might indicate. I think Arizona State was up 28-0 like 4 minutes into the game. It was one of those games. Like, I think I've talked about these before, but it just, you see a score on Twitter and you're like, that can't be right. And you turn on the game, you're like, oh my Lord, there's blood everywhere. What is going on? And I'm not a big Jed Fish believer. I don't think that that's probably going to work out great for Arizona. So you've got year one of a team that lost by 63 points last year. And now you've got a coach who I don't really believe in, and it's year one. And Herm Edwards I don't think Herm Edwards is ever going to get them to the Rose Bowl or anything, but it's like he's, stabilized that program, and they're at least like a 8-ish win team probably now. So yeah, I think I looked very seriously at that one and ended up deciding like, that game can get weird enough that you don't necessarily want to bet on it. But yeah, that is a perfectly defensible pick.
Jaden Daniels, quarterback at Arizona State, incredibly fun to watch, and was also partly responsible for the one parlay I ever hit.
That's true.
The Arizona State quarterback as a true freshman. One other one that we haven't touched on: Auburn +10.5 versus Georgia. That's a lot of points for Auburn to be getting. With Bo Nix, we know he's a Heisman contender. He's a top 10 draft pick probably. Eventually he's got to be good, right? Tom, am I crazy? Eventually it's got to happen.
Auburn is one of those teams that's just like, it's just such a random number generator of a program. Like they're gonna whatever you think they're gonna do, they're gonna do the opposite. And that's such a weird series anyway. They call it the Deep South's oldest rivalry, and they play every year, and you just get a bunch of weird results there. They had that one that year with the tipped pass. You remember that a couple of years ago? And first year for Brian Harsin there, that's going to be a very different offense from what Gus Malzahn ran. So I think they're probably going to take a step back this year. So my inclination would be Georgia give the points there, because I think they're going to have a real transition year for Harsin coming in, but I, I don't feel super comfortable. 10.5 is just enough points that it's like, oh yeah, Auburn was down 17, and then they snap the ball backwards, or Georgia takes an intentional safety with up 12, and then that just seems like betting an Auburn game always just seems like, oh, this is gonna end terribly. I'm definitely gonna lose in the dumbest possible way.
Yeah, and you're just sitting there in your living room, flames shooting around you. This is fine. So that'll do it, Tom. Anything else before we get out of here? You got any other games or anything else that you want to touch on before we head out?
The only other one that I had on here that I didn't list was Navy plus 23 at Notre Dame, which the last 7 years they've met, Notre Dame has beaten them by less than 23 points in 6 of the 7. So Navy's just one of those teams that they're not going to be good this year. That this is not, they have started their kind of decline phase, I think, under Ken Niumatalolo, but it's such a hard team to blow out because of the way they run the ball. They didn't play Notre Dame last year for the first time in a million years because of the COVID situation, obviously. So they haven't really had to think about defending that triple option for a year. You don't have the carryover from last year. It just seems like, Notre Dame's going to win that game, but they're going to win that game by 17 points or 20 points, not 23. 23 just seems like an awful lot to bet against a team that could hang on to the ball for 37 minutes.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where if you start thinking about you've got to cover, and then each possession gets like more valuable than the last, and then you're playing from behind even though you're ahead, and it's dumb. That's why I tell coaches all the time, don't worry about the number. And they're always like, I'm worried about the number. It's like, coaches, you shouldn't worry about the number.
There is only one coach who I think would openly say he's worried about the number, and that is Lane Kiffin. 100% Lane Kiffin would tell you, oh yeah, I knew what the number was. Wanted to make sure we hit that. Maybe Dana Holgerson too.
Lane Kiffin would be like, if I could score half points, I would, just because. All right, so that'll do it. Yeah.
Why did you throw your play sheet up in the air when you? It's like, well, we hit the over. That's okay. Well, all right, cool.
Huzzah! Yeah, I can't wait. It's going to be fun. College football. There's nothing like it. So hope you enjoyed that show. We will probably do other shows beyond this one. Probably another one tomorrow.
Keeping the promises realistic. That's a veteran move right there. Good job.
So thank you all for listening. Just a reminder to check out BuckeyeScoop.com. All of the great podcasts. Bill Green and Mark Givler finally got through all of their top 100, the Scoop 100. 10 shows, 10 players each, breaking it down, the list from 100 to number 1. It's just a fantastic series to listen to if you're into recruiting nationally and even just locally with Ohio State. There's plenty of Buckeye prospects throughout and guys that you'll hear about now and then see on down the road. So I recommend that. And again, if you're not yet a member of BuckeyeScoop.com, totally recommend it. The Ask the Insiders message board is always hopping as it is right now. So if you're not yet a member, feel free to join. And that will do it. We will talk to you guys tomorrow. Promise.